Hey, Dave Paulides, the Can-Am Missing Project, and this is a copyrighted edition for our YouTube page. I'm here on a tributary to the Flathead River, and this tributary has gone up a couple feet in the last just a couple days. The water's gotten a little murky because of the snow runoff, but it's a beautiful spot, and you can catch 16-inch cutthroat in here day in and day out, so it's a fun place to come. Lots of wildlife, lots of birds, as you're going to hear probably in this video. Answer a first question that came in this last week is, Dave, why don't you post all of the rest of the videos that are on other channels to this channel? And I would, but they're not mine. And the vast majority that people are violating the copyright on is a coast-to-coast interview, since I've done almost 35, I think, to date. These people are all violating the law. I'm not going to do it, and Coast to Coast has been so nice to me. George Knapp, George Norrie, I owe a bit of gratitude to each of them, and that's why. I've also done many other interviews with other channels, and they own those rights as well. Now, unless I've worked out something with them, and I have on a few that you'll see on this channel. A lot of people sometimes come to this channel and you don't realize how many videos there are now on here. So please go back and look at the video section. You're going to see a series of videos I've done in Colorado and in Australia. We went to the location where these people disappeared and showed you the spot, showed you the location. So take a tour around. Also, just below where you're watching this movie, there's a description of the video. In that descriptive box, there's location for our website, for our email address, where to order, where to contact, general information about this video as well. So please look at that. Somebody sent me an interesting bit about survival enemies, something I don't talk about very often. Now, having done and spent a lot of time with Les Stroud in making our first movie, Missing 411, a man could go anywhere in the woods and he would not have a problem surviving just on what's growing and what's around him. And I wish I had that ability. Many of you would do well to carry a pamphlet, just a piece of paper that you can buy at a lot of the outdoor stores that talk about all the different types of things that are growing in the environments that you're going to. That would aid you well in a survival situation. Being around Les, you could write a whole book about that, so it's kind of interesting. Now, survival enemies that was sent to me, by the way, thank you for sending that. The number one thing on the list is pain. I know a little bit about pain on the trail. Having broken my leg on the trail in Australia, Angie and I were filming a segment on guided coot. That segment is on our channel here. You can go back and look at it. But when we were out there for several hours, and it had rained the night before, and we were meandering our way around filming different segments. And at one point we were setting up, and right behind us, this giant something comes blowing through this tree all the way down to the ground. And we just stood there stunned, looking, waiting to see something huge come out of it. Nothing did. It was really odd. But just after that, not long after that, we're getting ready to leave. So I have the camera and the tripod on my shoulder, and I'm going over a boulder, and it was wet. I started to slip and, heaven forbid, drop the camera. I didn't, but I heard it was an awkward lean back, and I heard something pop. And I knew something was bad. And I pushed off on my right leg, and I've broken the tib fib on my right leg before, and that's a disaster. But on this leg, I was able to put some weight on it. And it was super painful, but I gave the camera and the tripod to Angie. I said, hey, let's try to get out of this park in one piece without calling rescue. Eventually did. Took a while. Get back to the hotel, and it's just blown up like a pumpkin. And Angie goes, well, Dave, you either broke it or you blew out your tendons and ligaments. And I said, you know, we've got a lot of the vacation to go, a lot of filming to go. Let's just keep going, which we did. Eventually got back to Colorado, and the doctor said, well, you didn't break it, that's obvious. And I go, how's that obvious? He goes, well, you were able to meander around on it for this long. We took an X-ray. I did break it, so I know pain. And the most pain most of you ever have on a trail is just breaking in a new pair of boots. Make sure you carry something to Band-Aid or something to put on a new blister that you have with footwear. Number 2 thing on the list is cold. We've all been cold in our lives, but when you get super cold, that's when it starts to alter your mental toughness and your mental acuity. So always carry an emergency blanket and also a big plastic garbage lining. And you may think that's stupid, but a lot of people use that as ponchos. They weigh almost nothing, and they do offer a level of insulation and protection. Next on the item is thirst. I've told you, hey, don't ever drink out of a river like this. Ponds, creeks, don't, because of giardia. And giardia can make you sick for weeks, even with medication. So in a true survival situation, yeah, I'm probably going to drink out of that river if I'm near death, but I don't want to. Next on the list is hunger. I tell people to always carry an extra couple bars. Again, if you had the knowledge of Les Stroud, Survivor Man, you're not going to need that. I mean, we were walking around, he would tell me, oh, we could eat that, we could eat that. But hunger is important. You know, try to always carry enough food for an emergency situation. Fatigue, next on the list. Insects. I carry something from REI called Jungle Juice. I think it's 97% DEET, and I've never seen something go through that, like even a swarm of mosquitoes. But that's just me. Boredom and loneliness. I think if you were near death, you're not going to care much about that, but I think those do come into play if you're doing well. So anyhow, thanks for that segment on survival enemies. I think it's important. The next bit, I'm going to talk about something I've never spoke about on the channel, but I have spoke about in presentations. That is a series of missing children in the woods, specifically missing boys. I've never known to have a cluster of missing girls. The state with the most missing girls is Pennsylvania, but I have several clusters of missing boys throughout the US. Why boys? And the disappearance I'm going to talk to you about is just west of Fort Collins, Colorado, in the Poudre Valley. And there's 3 boys, 3 years old, 4 years old, and 9 years old. First case I'm going to talk to you about is Alfred Beelart's, July 2nd, 1938, Rocky Mountain National Park. Alfred was vacationing there with his parents. And they were down near a river much like this. And his dad said he turned around and Alfred was gone, that quick. And I have many stories where parents say it happened that quick. So the Park Service immediately thought, well, Alfred must be right there in the water. So they shut down the creek, river, put blockades in it, brought in like 50 people to shut it down, to search it, look under rocks, and they did. They did a heck of a job shutting that down. But their entire focus was right there. And in search and rescue, you gotta have a broad focus. You can't have tunnel vision. And in this case, as that was evolving, there's a husband and wife coming out of the mountains. And they stop and they take a break, and they hear something up above them. And they look up, and they see a little boy looking over a ledge. And they say to each other, wow, that's bad parenting. But they're under a location called Devil's Nest, which is about 4 or 5 miles away from Alfred disappeared and about 3,000 feet higher in elevation. And they get back down to the park basin, down to their car, and they see hundreds and hundreds of people swarming. They find out that someone's disappeared, but that's all they know. They go back to their home, and the next morning they look in the paper and they see Alfred's picture. And they go, oh my God, I think that's the boy we saw up in the woods. So they drive back to the park, they tell the park people, and well, they're dumbfounded. They can't believe it. But they listen, and they decide that they're going to send a team, a technical climbing team, up into Devil's Nest to look for this little boy. And it took hours and hours for the team to finally get in there. And they don't find anything. So a couple things. Alfred was never found. But everything you will ever read that was done by a ranger or a park official about this incident, they're going to say Alfred was in there. And they completely discount and won't even address what was seen by these people. Now, maybe if one parent had seen it, you could discount it. But two people, I don't think you can discount that. And a little boy getting in there, if you and I hiked in there, we couldn't get in there without assistance. It's rough, it's rugged, it's in the middle of nowhere, it's bizarre. So, Alfred Beale Arch, July 2nd, 1938. Next case happened 40 years later, and about 27, 23 miles away as you go east. And that was the case of Chris Vigil, July 30th, 1978. He was 9 years old. And he's with his mom and his siblings, and he's walking up into the mountains with them on a series of switchbacks up Grey Rock Mountain. I've been there. Not an easy hike, but it was fun. And you take these switchbacks up to the top, and then you see this big, giant piece of rock. That's why it's called Grey Rock Mountain. Giant piece of granite. Well, on the back side is a giant boulder field. And as Chris had taken off from his mom, ran ahead, Mom didn't see him, but the people stated that they heard a scream from the backside of this mountain. Well, the mother eventually goes back down, gets search and rescue. Everyone starts to arrive that night. I interviewed the head of search and rescue for the fire department on this mission. And he said, Dave, when we were arriving, the snow started to fall. And within hours, there were 3 feet of snow on that mountain. And for April, end of April, beginning of May, that's unreal for that area. And one of the searchers broke their ankle right near the beginning of the search. So he told me, he said, we had to cancel it after just a few days because it was too treacherous. They went back in days later, and they tried to find any remnants of him, and they didn't. And the sad thing is, Chris was never found. So, it's case number 2. 40-year difference between them. Now, let's step ahead 21 years to October 2nd, 1999, and Alan Adadero and his brother owned a resort on the Poudre River, about 21 miles on that same river, further east from where Chris disappeared. Kind of strange association. And as the Adaderos were owning this place, they had a group of people from Denver that came in and were staying there. It was a singles group. And they decided that they wanted to go up to the fish hatchery just a few miles away from the Adadero Resort. And Jocelyn, who's Alan's daughter, was going to go with them. Well, Jared heard that Jocelyn was going to go and asked his dad, Dad, I want to go. They said that they'd take me. And Alan checks, and they're going to take him. And they'd watch him, and he goes, yeah, okay, you can go ahead and go, because he liked watching the fish. So the single group goes, and this fish hatchery is right on the highway, just a few miles up. It's right there. Well, somehow or another, this group decides that they're going to drive another 20 miles up it further into the mountains and go to this place called the Big South Trail. And without checking with Alan, they decided to take his son and daughter with them up there. So Jocelyn kind of hangs with this one group, and Jared's a pretty busy boy, and he starts running down the trail ahead of everybody. And they lose track of him. And he comes across a couple fishermen, and he asks the fishermen if there's any bears around here. And the fishermen say, nope, there's no bear. Now these fishermen don't do anything, unbelievably. They just let him walk away. And that was the last person to ever seen Jared alive. 4 years later, a couple of hikers are hiking the ridge 500 feet above the river, and they found a skull cap and a tooth. And then they found his pants and his sweatshirt and both shoes. Now, Jared was the kind of boy that never tied his shoes. And in many talks with Alan, and just climbing that hill myself, and again, there's a video I made of this that's on the channel, and this case is highlighted in our first film. The area to get up to where Jared's body was found, yeah, I had to get on my hands and knees to climb most of that. And when I finally got to the top, where he was found, this is the truth. I found one of those square Rubik's cubes that's really small. It's on like a keychain. And that was right where he was found. It was weathered. I thought, man, that's old. I ended up showing that to Alan months later. And Alan goes, you know, Dave, what Jared's favorite color was? I said, what's that? And he said, silver and black. It's the color of the Rubik's Cube. Pretty weird. Pretty weird. So I had the tooth analyzed, or I had the photo of the tooth analyzed by a forensic dentist, and he said that it did fit a boy of Jared's age. So that was confirmed. There's a lot of things about Jared's case that doesn't make sense over the years, and I've talked about that at length, and I won't bore you with more details about it. But I've always ranked that near the top as one of the strangest cases I've ever worked. Now, why do I talk to you about these three boys? Well, first of all, two of the boys disappeared on the Poudre River, Chris Vigil and Jared Adadero, right off the Poudre River. 13 miles from where Adadero's case happened, and if you followed the Poudre River straight back towards its beginnings, which is in Rocky Mountain National Park, that's where Alfred Paulides disappeared. Very strange. So you have this triangle of these three boys. Now, nobody would have put that together because it's too many years between disappearances. Park rangers have moved on, law enforcement has retired, and nobody really cares. Now, there are other places in the United States where I have identified multiple boys disappearing in a confined area like this. And we'll talk about that in the future. But why do I bring this up to you now? Because it bothers me, and I want somebody else besides me and our team to think about it. More people that can think about it, the better. So why boys, number one? Why not girls? Because there have been girls on this trail. A side note, very close, well, kind of between the point where Alfred Paulides disappeared and Jared Adadero disappeared, inside of Rocky Mountain National Park, Angie and I were on this trail and we're walking along, and she taps me on the back and she goes, Dave, turn around. And I look behind me, here's this little boy out in the middle of nowhere, standing next to this lake by himself. I go, holy shit. I'm thinking to myself, what's this kid doing? I go, hey, what's going on? What are you doing here? And he goes, oh, I'm with my family. Probably looked like he was 5 or 6. I go, oh, where's your mom and dad? Oh, they're back there. I go, can you take us to them? Oh, sure. So they're not in view. They're probably 150 yards away. He takes us over to his dad, who's actually in a tent, and his mom's sitting in a chair. I go, oh, is this your son? Oh, yeah. I go, you know he's next to a body of water, and there's moose tracks and elk tracks and mountain lions all throughout here? Oh, yeah. I said, well, just so you know, there's 3 boys that have disappeared within this general area. Oh, we didn't know that. We talked about that for days, and it bothered me because what if we weren't there and the boy fell in the lake? Or what if a moose came up and stomped on him, or a mountain lion attacked him? National parks are not a place where you let down your guard. And I think that's a big message that we should send to all families. Keep your eyes on your kids at all times in a national park. Keep them in front of you. Big message right there. So anyhow, talked about some disappearances, talked about some safety issues, and again, as we get closer to the summertime, and we're on the verge of the national parks opening and people going out into the outdoors, the more people that can see these stories, the more people that we can probably save from catastrophe. So again, I ask you to pass these videos on. We talk just facts. We don't talk opinions. We don't talk hypothesis. These are all in the books. The stories are there in more detail. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you next week.